Welcome to this video where we're going to be talking about the anatomy of emotions. And if you've been watching the series I've been making, this is part 3 of Letting Go, which is a book written by a Dr. David Hawkins, which completely changed my life. And so I'm really excited to unpack everything that this book has to offer. In the process, I am getting so much more understanding and freedom just by unpacking this and sharing some of the concepts that I find and some of the principles that I find really powerful. So glad you're on this journey with me, and excited to hear from you how some of these techniques start transforming things in your life. So with that, let's jump into the anatomy of emotions. Now, we've gone over already in a previous video how the mind handles negative feelings. And really, we've just got these 3 methods that we use: suppression, repression, expression, and sometimes escape. This is how our mind tends to deal with negative feelings. But as we've seen, and as we'll continue to see on this journey, all of those methods basically don't allow the energy of negative feelings to dissipate. All they do is kind of like putting on a band-aid on a gaping wound. It's a short-term solution. And so as we go through this journey of self-improvement and self-discovery over the years, we try all these different things to do with self-improvement. We might try different ways of eating. We might try different self-help techniques and read different books and get involved in groups. But eventually we'll come to this point where we realize the only way to improve our experience of life is to let go of our own negativity. Come to a place where we take full responsibility for where that negativity comes from, and we're able to deal with it in this permanent and really powerful way. So that's what we're going to get into in this video, is the anatomy of emotions, how they all get stored inside of us, and how we can start to get to those higher levels of emotion, not in a craving short-term sort of way that ends up swinging back the backside of the pendulum and eventually, putting us into trouble, but how we can move our entire psyche to these higher levels by letting go of negative programming and emotions. So let's jump into it. First of all, we're going to look at some of the different psychologies, or really specifically just one specific psychology of how human emotions work. There's so many different ways to understand the human mind. There are so many different theories about how we develop our psyches and how we come up with issues like depression and anxiety and stress and feeling lost and aimless in life, and all these different things that come from our own mind. There's all these different ways to explain how these work. Some of them contain a lot of ancient symbology, some of them have mythology, and they're all based on hypotheses that are constantly debated. As a result, there are various different schools of psychotherapy with different aims and methods. And, simplicity, when things are really simple, that's often an indication of its truthfulness. It's not complicated. No one's trying to sell you anything. It's just kind of self-evident. Simplicity is often a guiding light in that sense. So in this explanation of the anatomy of emotions, we're going to use a simple, workable, testable map of the emotions that can be verified by your own subjective experience as well as from objective testing. So whichever one of these psychologies we look at, we realize that the primary human goal among all these different goals that we have, the number one thing that we try to do as humans is we try to survive. Every human desire that we have is about trying to ensure our own personal survival and the survival of all our little groups. Our family, friends, our tribe, our church, our country, maybe it's our ethnicity, our language, our customs, how we do things. The ego is constantly scanning the environment for how do I survive better and how do I help my little clan survive better. And so to this end, we're all interested in the survival of our body because we believe that we are our body and therefore we need our body to go on experiencing. And because we, in these early stages of our evolution, we see ourselves as separate and limited, we become stressed by our sense of lack, our sense of separation. And it's common for people to look outside of themselves for the satisfaction of their own needs. This leads us to experience ourselves as vulnerable because we're not sufficient, but just by ourselves. We need in order to feel like we're sufficient. So the mind, and when I say we, I'm talking about the mind, not the true self. The mind is therefore a survival mechanism, and its method of survival is primarily the use of emotions. This blew me away when I realized this. This one paradigm shift alone is enough to change the way that you deal with life in general. This is a really powerful paradigm breaker right here. So I'll read this out. Thoughts are engendered by the emotions, and eventually emotions become shorthand for thoughts. Thousands and even millions of thoughts can be replaced by a single emotion. Emotions are more basic and primitive than mental processes. Reason is the tool that the mind uses to achieve its emotional ends. When used by the intellect, the basic underlying emotion is usually unconscious, or at least out of awareness. When the underlying emotion is forgotten or ignored and not expressed, people are unaware of the reason for their actions and they develop all kinds of plausible reasons. In fact, they frequently don't know why they're doing what they're doing. So this is what's going on when we're going through life and we're kind of just run unconsciously by those difficult negative emotions. And so, we're driven by fear to create a sense of security for ourselves. We're driven by sometimes guilt to punish ourselves and to make things keep going wrong in our lives in just little ways that accumulate. We're driven by anger against ourselves and others when we go around and self-sabotage and hold on to that anger and eventually end up getting sick. All of these negative emotions are running in the background, unconscious processes driving us to behave like this. So there's a simple way to become conscious of the underlying emotional goal behind any activity through the use of the question, what for? And again, I find in my personal experience, I've got so many reasons that I think I'm doing things for. I've got all these stories about why I go to work, why I have the kind of relationships that I have in my life. I've got stories for why I do what I do on the weekend, why I exercise and eat a certain way. All of these are stories that we get caught up with, but all the stories are fueled by emotion. So imagine that your entire being is like a steam train, right? And we're here in the steam train. All the energy for that steam train is coming from the furnace, which is fueled by coal. So all day as the steam train's running along, it's being powered by this coal, and we can see our emotions as that furnace, right? And a lot of the time, if we're less progressed on our own personal path of awakening, we're shoveling all this negative coal into the engine, and all this negative steam is coming out of our heads with this steam train, and we're like, oh my goodness, how could I have thoughts about other people that are so horrible? Or oh my goodness, how could my thoughts be so negative all the time? And we try and change the thoughts, change our neurochemistry. We go and distract ourselves, or we try and just change our biochemistry through diet alone, but we're not dealing with the furnace. We're dealing with all the steam happening up here. The furnace is what drives this steam. And if you have a shovel full of coal, which represents just like, let's say, one emotion, You shovel that shovelful of coal into the furnace. What happens? It burns hot and bright and releases all this steam, and all of these thoughts we have, thousands, sometimes millions of thoughts, all originate in what we're burning, the emotions. So we can start to swap out or let go of the negative emotions, burn them all off and stop holding on to them, then we can start burning clean fuel, happiness, joy, peace, love. This can start to fuel our whole life, and this is what changes everything. Doesn't matter if it's health, finances, relationships, your sense of fulfillment, it all comes from this furnace. What's coming out? How do we clear the junk out? So that's where we're going with this. Bit of a side note there, but let's continue. There's a simple way to become conscious of the underlying emotional goal behind any activity through use of the question, what for? With each answer, what for, is asked again and again until the basic feeling is uncovered. An example would be the following. A man wants to buy a Lamborghini. Okay. He thinks in his mind of all the logical reasons why he wants this Lamborghini, but logic doesn't really explain it. So he asks himself, what do I want a Lamborghini for? Well, he says, it's to achieve status, recognition, respect, and solid citizen success status. He wants to feel like he's really made it in the world. And then he asks himself this question again. What do I want status for? Well, respect and approval from others, he might say, and to ensure that I continue to get that respect. Again, what do I want respect and approval for? To have the feeling of security, of course. Again, what do I want the feeling of security for? So I can feel happy. The continual question, what for, reveals that basically there inside of this man are feelings of insecurity, unhappiness, and lack of fulfillment. Every activity or desire will reveal that the basic goal is to achieve a certain feeling. Doesn't matter what we're doing in life, we're constantly motivated by trying to achieve a certain feeling, whether it's getting away from pain and fear and all this negativity, moving towards happiness, moving towards those states of joy and love. Everything we do is colored by this kind of motivation of wanting to feel a certain way. So there are no other goals when we break it down other than to overcome fear and to achieve happiness. Everything's fueled by that. Emotions are connected with what we believe will ensure our survival, not what actually will. Emotions themselves are actually the cause of the basic fear that drives everyone to seek security constantly. It's all emotional. Doesn't matter what you're wanting to change in your life or what you want to achieve, everything comes from those emotions. So now we're going to get into the scale of emotions, and this explains what some of these darker, more negative emotions are that tend to create all these issues in our life, and what are some of these higher emotional states that we can get to by relinquishing and letting go of these darker stages and moving up higher. For simplicity and clarity, we're going to use the scale of emotions that corresponds with the levels of consciousness. A thorough presentation of consciousness levels, their scientific basis, and practical application is found in Power versus Force, the hidden determinants of human behavior. So this was another book written by David Hawkins, last published in 2012. Power versus Force. I really encourage you to have a look at that. It's an amazing book that describes these different levels of consciousness. Briefly though, everything emits energy, either positive or negative. Intuitively, we know the difference between a positive person, someone who's friendly, genuine, and caring, and a negative one, someone who's greedy, deceitful, and hateful. The energy of Mother Teresa was obviously different from the energy of Adolf Hitler. Most people's energy is somewhere in between the two. Music, places, books, animals, intentions, and all of life emit an energy that can be calibrated as to its essence and its degree of truth. So we can actually look at anything in the universe, calibrate it using this kinesiologic testing method, and understand, is that resonating with a lower level of chaos and lies, deception, appearances, shadows, or is that resonating at a higher level of clarity and truth? This can all be tested using this method. Like goes to like. The different energies constellate in attractor patterns or levels of consciousness. The map of consciousness, which I'll post a link to in the video notes, provides a linear logarithmic view of this non-linear energetic terrain. That's a big statement. There's a lot of seemingly esoteric ideas in here, so stay with me. Each level of consciousness or attractor pattern is calibrated on a logarithmic scale. Logarithmic meaning it is multiplied at every level. Every level that you get higher, there's not just a linear progression of 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like a logarithmic multiplier expansion as you move up these levels. For example, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. It's kind of going like this. And if you want to think of spiral dynamics, if you're familiar with it, you want to think of the levels of consciousness as one goes higher, expanding out like that, logarithmically. So the map of consciousness provides a linear logarithmic view of the nonlinear energetic terrain. Each level of consciousness is calibrated on a logarithmic scale of energetic power, ranging from 1, right down here at the bottom of consciousness, all the way to 1,000. The level of full enlightenment, 1,000 at the top of the map, represents the highest level attainable in the human realm. It's the energy of Jesus Christ, the Buddha, and Krishna. The level of shame, which is around about 20, is at the bottom, close to death, representing bare survival. The level of courage, 200, is the critical point that marks the shift from negativity to positive energy. It's the energy of integrity, being truthful, empowering, and having empowerment, and having the capacity to cope. The levels of consciousness below courage are destructive, whereas the levels above it are life supportive. A simple muscle test reveals the difference. Negative stimuli below 200 instantly weakens the muscles, and positive stimuli above 200 instantly strengthen the muscle. True power strengthens, force weakens. Above the level of courage, people seek us out as beings because we give energy to them, power, and we have goodwill towards them. Below the level of courage, people avoid us because we take energy from them, force, and we want to use them for our own material or emotional needs. So here, we're going to get into, now that we've got that negative threshold being at 200, and just stay with me. I know this sounds like really quite out there and wiggy stuff, but we're just using the scale so that we can better understand how our emotions work. And we've got a threshold of 200 above which we start to get into these positive states, these life-giving states where we start being in harmony with the whole universe. So we're going to start from the higher energies to describe this scale and move down to the lower as we go. So at the very highest level that we've got on this scale, other than enlightenment at 1,000, we next have peace. So peace is calibrated at 600. Peace is experienced as perfection, bliss, effortlessness, and oneness. It's a state of non-duality between separateness and beyond the intellect, as in the peace that passes all understanding. That's one of the quotes from the Bible where it talks about some of the levels that you can get to in intimacy with God, peace that understands all understanding. It's described as illumination and enlightenment. This is rare in the human realm. The next one down is joy at 540. Love that is unconditional and unchanging despite circumstances and actions of others. The world is illuminated by exquisite beauty, which is seen in all things. The perfection of creation is self-evident. There's closeness to unity and discovery of self, compassion for all, enormous patience, the feeling of at oneness with others and a concern for their happiness. A sense of self-completion and self-sufficiency prevails at the level of joy. So moving down, we come to love at 500. Love is a way of being that is forgiving, nurturing, and supportive. It does not proceed from the mind, rather it emanates from the heart. Love focuses on the essence of a situation, not the details. It deals with the whole, not particulars. As perception is replaced with vision, it takes no position, and it sees the intrinsic value and lovability of all that exists. This is love, all embracing. We see the beauty and the perfection and the lovability of all things. Seeing through all those illusions of what's wrong with the world, what's wrong with other people, what's wrong with me, and seeing to the true essence of everything. That's the level of love. Moving down, we have reason at 400. This aspect differentiates humans from the animal world. There's the ability to see things in the abstract, to conceptualize, to be objective, and to make rapid and correct decisions. Its enormous utility is in problem solving. Science, philosophy, medicine, and logic are expressions of this level. Moving down, we've got acceptance at 350. This energy is easygoing, laid back, harmonious, flexible, inclusive, and free of inner resistance. Life is good. You and I are good. I feel connected. It meets life on life's terms. There's no need to blame others or blame life on the level of acceptance. We finally relinquish all that blame. Next, we have neutrality at 250. This is a way of life that's comfortable, pragmatic, and relatively free of emotionality. It's okay either way. It's free of rigid positions, non-judgmental, and non-competitive. Then moving down to courage on 200, again, that threshold of negativity coming through to positivity. Everything below courage tending to attract to death and chaos, and everything above courage tending to attract more life-giving energies and love. So the energy of courage says, I can do it. It's determined, it's excited about life, it's productive, independent, and self-empowered. Effective action is possible from the level of courage. Then we have pride. Pride says, on 175, pride says, my way is the best way. Its focus is on achievement, desire for recognition, specialness, and perfectionism. It feels better than and superior to other people. So as I'm going through all these emotions, you're probably noticing how these show up in your own life and different aspects of yourself that seem to resonate with these different levels. And, you know, we all contain the full spectrum of these emotions. We all contain the potential to experience all these emotions from the highest to the lowest. However, we all tend to resonate most strongly. It's like our average performance, our average output, our average way of being tends to resonate more strongly on one of these particular levels. And it's cool to see that all of the levels have their, the levels below 200 have their aspects, their elements of suffering that create suffering in our own life. And it's cool to see where we're doing this on each of the lower levels so we can start to be open to letting go of how we're creating our own suffering. So just notice where this applies to you in your life at these different levels. Perfectionism, specialness, desire for recognition, focus on achievement. I know that I've been able to confront and let go of so much of these aspects of pride because this is a level that I'm really dealing with at the moment. Feeling better than, feeling superior, that's all pride. Anger is on the level of 150. Now, this energy overcomes the source of fear by using force, threats, and attack. On the lower levels, we use force. On the higher levels, we use power. We emanate power. Anger is irritable, explosive, bitter, volatile, and resentful. It likes to get even, as in, I'll show you. Then we come down to desire on 125. Desire is always seeking gain, acquisition, pleasure, and getting something outside of oneself. It's insatiable, never satisfied, and craving. I have to have it. Give me what I want and give it to me now. That's desire. Give me what I want and give it to me now, and I don't care what I have to do to get it. That's the energy of desire. Moving down, fear, 100. This energy sees danger, which is everywhere. It's avoidant, defensive, preoccupied with security, possessive of others, jealous, restless, anxious, and vigilant. I can remember times in my life where I felt like there was just danger everywhere. I was just always scanning the environment for danger. And, this is what a lot of our culture is trapped in, is this constant stress response. This is why stress is such a huge deal these days, because we're constantly feeding off this energy of fear. So much of the advertising industry is based on it. Even if you look at desire is actually an extrapolation or a higher form of fear. It's that same energy of give me what I want, I need it, or I'll die. It's constantly scanning for opportunities and threats. Jealous, restless, anxious, and vigilant on level 100. Moving down to grief on 75. On the level of grief, there is helplessness, despair, loss, regret, and the feeling, if only I had that. If only I had X, Y, Z. Separation, depression, sadness, being a loser, mournful, as in, I just can't go on. That's the level of grief at 75. And, I know in my experience, when I experienced a lot of grief during my teenage years is when I really started dealing with grief. How I dealt with it back then, because I didn't know about letting go, was I tried all the normal tricks of the mind: suppression, expression, suppression and repression, expression, escapism. Tried all these different things to deal with feelings of apathy, and ended up having to deal with that apathy that I'd suppressed later on by really letting it go, by allowing myself to feel the depths of my apathy so that I could surrender it out of my system. So this energy is characterized by hopelessness. Level down now, under grief is apathy on 50. This energy is characterized by hopelessness, playing dead, being a drain to others, being immobilized, and the feelings I can't and who cares. Have there ever been times in your life when you felt like, I just can't do it? There's nothing I can do, and who cares anyway? What's the point? Poverty is common on the level of apathy. Then moving down is just two more emotions on this scale. These are the two lowest vibration emotions that are on this scale. We've got guilt. In this energy field, on 30, one wants to punish and be punished. It leads to self-rejection, masochism, remorse, feeling bad, and self-sabotage. It's all my fault. Accident proneness, suicidal behavior, and projection of self-hatred onto evil others is common on the level of guilt. This is the basis of many psychosomatic illnesses. So this has been such a big one for me in my letting go journey, is learning to let guilt come up and not try and avoid it, and just accept it and allow it, let it be felt, and eventually let it leave my system. And I know for a fact that this has been the underpinning of a lot of my illnesses that I've had, psychosomatic illnesses, such as gut issues, digestive issues that I've had for years, that started to lift when I started letting go of guilt. Issues to do with my blood chemistry and my energy levels, all tied in with this little root system of guilt that I've been surrendering. And it's been just amazing how that's been shifting my physical body. Then we move down to shame. so this is the lowest one on the scale, characterized by humiliation, as in hanging your head in shame. It's traditionally accompanied by banishment. Shame is destructive to health and leads to cruelty towards ourselves and to others. So, in summary, having shared all those emotions with you, from shame all the way up to, what have we got at the top, peace, we can see that the lower end of the scale is associated with lower vibrational frequencies, lower energy, lower power, poorer life circumstances, poorer relationships, less abundance, less love, and poorer physical and emotional health. Because of the low energy, such needy people drain us on all levels. They tend to be avoided and they find themselves surrounded by people on that same level, for example, in jail. As we let go of negative feelings, there's a progressive movement up the scale to courage and then beyond, with increasing happiness, effectiveness, success, and more effortless abundance. We tend to seek out such people. Think about how attracted you feel to people who are like that. We say that they're high. They give off life energy to all the things around them. Animals are attracted to them. They have a green thumb and they positively influence the lives of all the people they come into contact with. At the level of courage, the negative feelings, that threshold again, 200, have not all disappeared, but now we have sufficient energy to handle them because we've re-owned our power and our self-adequacy. The fastest way to move from the bottom to the top is telling the truth to ourselves and to others. This is the letting go technique in a nutshell. How do we let go? We tell the truth about our own feelings to ourselves. We acknowledge them. We allow those feelings to be there and not try and change them or condemn them. And that allows us to experience the emotions in full, and that allows them to lift out of our body, out of our cache, out of our unconscious mind where they've been creating all these problems for so long. So the energy levels are also associated traditionally with the body energy centers that are referred to as chakras. This is where we get into some more of the esoteric, strange sounding stuff. I encourage you to suspend your disbelief and hear this out. See this thing out to the end, and let the results speak for themselves. So when I talk about strange things like chakras, just get over it and see if this is actually beneficial to you. So the chakras are energy centers through which Kundalini energy is said to flow once it's awakened at the level of courage. The energy centers, chakras, can be measured by a variety of clinical techniques and sensitive electronic instruments. On the map of consciousness, the chakras calibrate as follows. Crown chakra at 600, remember that's the level of peace. Third eye at 525. The throat resonates at 350, the heart at 505. And again, back to these different levels we were talking about. 505 is over that threshold of love. That's the energy that the heart gives off when it's flowing. Solar plexus at 275, sacral or spleen at 275. See how we're starting to move down on the lower scale of the consciousness scale here. The base or root chakra at 200. So that's just on the threshold of courage, base or root chakra. When we relinquish negative feelings, the energy in our higher chakras increases. For example, instead of habitually venting our spleen, which is the second chakra, we're now described as all heart, fifth chakra, because that Kundalini energy has flowed up to the heart level. And again, you can think of this Kundalini energy as just your own deepest life force energy. And the reason it starts to move up is because as we relinquish emotions, negative emotions, we're actually relinquishing old programs, survival mechanisms, behavior patterns that have served us in the past, but they don't serve our overall well-being. So as we start to clear this, it's like that Kundalini life force energy can flow to those higher chakras and we can start to live from a different energy center. Very amazing stuff. So this energy system has a direct impact on our physical body. The energy in each chakra flows through our channels called meridians to the whole energy body, which is like a blueprint to the physical body. I've made a video on the energy body in the past because it's really important that you understand that we're so much more than just our physical body. Each meridian is associated with a particular organ, and each organ is associated with a particular emotion. It's all interwoven here. A negative emotion throws off the energy balance of its associated acupuncture meridian and the related organ. For instance, depression, despair, and melancholy are all associated with a liver meridian, so these emotions tend to interfere with liver function. Every negative feeling impairs a body organ, and as the years go by, that organ becomes diseased and eventually fails to function. This is what amazes me about the mind-body connection, and this is coming to the forefront of mainstream science so much more now, because we just can't deny the fact anymore that there's this deep mind-body connection that kind of outstrips all of our traditional models of the thinking self being separate from the feeling, experiencing body. And we're starting to come full circle with that as a culture. And it's really interesting to see here that every emotion corresponds with a meridian channel and an organ, and over the years we become the expression of whatever our negative emotion is that we're holding on to, whether we're resonating in that higher level of love and vitality and peace, and that's reflecting in our physical bodies, or on those lower levels of shame and guilt, and we're accumulating chronic conditions where these organs are starting to fail and manifest as things like cancer and all kinds of other illnesses that derail us. It's all coming from this deeper energy. Remember, shoveling the coal into the stove, into the fireplace, into the engine of the train. It's all emotional. It's all energetic. This is what's driving our train. So powerful to understand this and to get in touch with this. The lower our emotional state, the more negatively we influence not only our own lives, but also all of life around us. The higher the emotional level of evolution, the more positive our life becomes on all levels, and we support all life around us. As negative emotions are acknowledged and surrendered, we get freer and we move up the scale, eventually experiencing predominantly positive feelings. All lower emotions are limitations and blind us to the reality of our true self. As we surrender our way up the scale and we near the top, a new type of experience begins to happen. At the very top of the scale, there occurs the realization of one's true self and the varying levels of illumination. The main importance of this is to note that as we get higher and freer, what the world calls spiritual awareness, intuition, and growth of consciousness occurs. This is the common experience of all people who surrender their negative feelings. They become more and more conscious. That which is impossible to see or experience at lower levels of consciousness becomes self-evident and stunningly obvious at higher levels. And we'll end this video there. Now that we've gone through that scale, I think that's a beautiful way to end, on the note of realizing that as we go on this path of surrender, as we relinquish the negative emotions, we're going to move to higher and higher levels of being and experience these states of love, joy, peace, happiness as our natural default state. That's incredible. That's what's got me on this journey, and that's what makes it all worth it. Knowing that life doesn't have to be an experience of suffering, doesn't have to be an experience of constant cycles of sadness and suffering and happy for a while and then sad and then happy and then mad and destructive and negative. We can actually move ourselves to these higher levels. We can evolve as beings and make this our ordinary experience, being in touch with the beauty of life itself. So that's the end of this video. In the next video, we're going to go into a little bit deeper how emotions are stored in our minds, and we're going to be looking at how we can handle crises which come up in our life, which are actually just our unconscious mind trying to empty out the cache of the negativity, how we can start to deal with that, and how we can heal our past as well. So that's the next video. We're going to go deeper into all of the how aspect of this journey. And then we're going to start to look at these emotions one by one in more and more detail so that we can understand where we're at on that scale and where different aspects of our life are on that scale. And then we can start to surrender through to those higher levels. So that's where we're going with this. I hope you got some really powerful points from that video and that you've already started to relinquish that negativity. You're on this journey with me of letting go. I will see you in the next video.